Mr. Carney is not a businessman. He is a political grifter who has used his political influence to turn decisions that profit his company at the expense of workers and seniors.
Mr. Carney is not a businessman. He's a political grifter. Truer words were never spoken. And we're talking about political truth today on this broadcast. Good morning. I'm David Krayden coming at you live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. This is another episode of Stand on Guard. My special guest today, Stefan Marque, who was the Conservative candidate in Laurier-Sainte-Marie, a Montreal riding, until he was mysteriously disqualified. When we come back,
the Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
we need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please like this station right now if you can. It helps us beat the daily suppression that we go through with YouTube. It's just incredible sometimes. Certain words we can't say, certain phrases we can't say. Looking forward to our conversation with Stefan Marque this morning. And I was just so angry when he was disqualified because it had something to do with his social media posts. And I looked at them and they looked great to me. I didn't see any problem. It's a free speech issue. But let me tell you something. This is not going to be a downer. I talked to Stefan before the show, and he still wants the Conservatives to win this election. He's got no axe to grind against Pierre. But I want to know how he feels about his free speech being taken away and how this affects the future of this party. But I'll tell you what, I don't believe Poilievre is listening to the communications people anymore. And it looks like it's paying off in dividends. Okay, look at this. Conservatives up 3% overnight. How thick is the coating of Teflon on Mark Carney? Well, I tell you, it can't be that thick because it's finally wearing thin. You can't be a tax dodger. You can't go out there and say, it's okay for me, but not for thee. I can avoid paying taxes. I can put my money and the company's money in Bermuda where there's no income tax, but you have to pay your taxes. I'm sorry, there's a double standard. There's a two-tiered justice system in this country, and there's a two-tiered finance system. So that's where we're at. And let's listen to Pierre Poilievre talk about this yesterday. I just love this.
Why I will end the liberal two-tier tax system where elites get loopholes and working people get audited. And I'm going to be putting hardworking Canadians first for a change. Here's how. 1, we will be naming a Bring It Home Economic and Tax Task Force, whose mandate will be to ensure that we close overseas tax havens and force the very wealthy to pay what they owe. That my task force will specifically propose solutions to close loopholes that allow tax havens to be a source of evading taxes for the well-connected and the global elite. I'll also direct CRA to reapportion the use of its staff. We're going to have fewer auditors going after charities and small businesses and more going after international tax evaders. The goal will be to collect an extra $1 billion from international tax havens and by closing the loopholes that enable them. We will create a public name and shame registry so that global, multinational, and billionaire tax dodgers are named and exposed so that everyone knows who they are. And we will expand the offshore tax informant program, giving whistleblowers up to 20% of recovered funds when they help expose illegal tax schemes.
Sounds good to me. This could net billions, not just 1 billion, but billions of dollars. And not only that, it could inspire some confidence. And I'm just waiting. We're waiting for Stefan to come back here. We were speaking before, and I'm hoping he's going to be here. Ah, there, he's back. Good. Thank you.
Hello,
And
David.
let me introduce. Yes, good morning, Stefan. This is my special guest today, Stefan Marque. He was the Conservative Party of Canada nominee in Laurier-Sainte-Marie. That's a Montreal riding. And you were going up against one of the people I think conservatives really don't like at all. That's Steven Guilbeault, the former Environment and Climate Change Minister, one of the most radical members of the Trudeau team. This is a guy who was arrested more times than we can count on one hand, including a stunt climbing the CN Tower. He was a Greenpeace activist. You had a chance of beating Mr. Guilbeault, did you not? Did you think you had a fairly good chance of winning this riding?
Well, I certainly would not have gone into this campaign race if I didn't think so. The entire intent was to definitely win this riding for the Conservative Party. From coast to coast, Mr. Guilbeault was not the favorite, I would say, from the Canadian electorate. This riding is quite a tough one, I would say, with regards to the political allegiance. People in Laurier-Sainte-Marie have adopted certain of these policies that the Liberal government through Steven Guilbeault have put forward. But I had the intent, all intents, to fight the man on good grounds.
You were disqualified, and it's still mysterious as far as the party is concerned. They've never really explained why they disqualified you to be their candidate. It had something to do, apparently, with your social media posts, which I have extensively looked at. But has the party had the decency, at least, to explain to you why you were so objectionable?
No. This is where there is some issue to be taken. The fact that I was named or nominated as a candidate for this riding on the 27th of April, after the party had asked me to provide them with my social media accounts so that they could go through them and see whether my statements there and the ideas and opinions shared were convenient. They went through them. I had over 4,700 posts on X, and they didn't say that there was anything wrong. So they nominated me after that, and then I made a few posts, like maybe a dozen, on X, which were, in my opinion, very favorable to the Conservative platform, what the party puts forth in their political program. And I got a call on the 1st of April. I thought it was April Fool's Day when the agent responsible for the region in Quebec announced that the hierarchy within had decided that they were discontented with my post, and that they would rescind my candidacy. So that was, utter surprise to me. The political program or platform of the party is really great. I adhered to the party principles because of it in great part. And it's Article 18. It actually puts forward the importance of freedom of expression. It's very antithetical to see that the party would rescind my candidacy on the basis of me expressing my opinion for the benefit of the electorate. If the idea of being a potential MP, deputy, a representative for the electorate means that we cannot express ourselves in their favor to the party and to the general public at large, because as I said here, the principles, the political principles are quite varied with the ones which are practiced in the West, for example, very different, and in other parts of Quebec. So if they're not willing to allow the candidates and deputies, eventually deputies, to speak their minds, there's a problem. There's a very, to me, a very big problem in that.
Well, I think, yeah, that's the problem, because anyone who is voting for the Conservative Party of Canada would assume that they do believe in something called freedom of speech, because the Conservative Party, of course, opposed the Online Harms Act, one of the most dangerous pieces of legislation ever to come before the House of Commons. I oppose that piece of legislation daily on this broadcast and in my writings. And I was very heartened to hear Pierre Poilievre about a year ago say that, yes, it was a odious bill that had a thought crimes component to it, and we need to stop this bill. I said, good. Conservative Party is behind freedom of speech. But this is why this incident bothered me, because we have nothing more to say, we have nothing more to add. We can't really tell you what Mr. Marque did wrong or was said wrong. Did you at any time actually speak to Mr. Poilievre's chief political strategist and campaign manager, Jenny Byrne, who I have known over the years?
No, I did not speak to any of the, let's say, higher echelon communication and campaign people. In fact, my candidacy was announced quite late in the process. I took the decision to fight for the Conservative Party of Canada at a moment where it appeared as though nobody wanted or was in the way to access that position. So, because I actually did participate in the political scene in 2022, I was a candidate for the Conservative Party of Quebec, and in fact, I had been quite, would say, significant player in that entire process. For a year, I was the liaison agent for the party and responsible to create riding associations throughout the 33 ridings in Montreal and Laval. So I thought I would put that experience to the benefit of the Conservative Party of Canada. So once I gave my answer and said, let's go, let's do it, I communicated with the Quebec chapter that manages the campaign. And I had a good relationship with the individuals that were the ones responsible to oversee the process. But quite frankly, in the span of 4 days, the hammer fell so quickly, and the break was so distinct I would say it lacked a little bit of diplomacy, because I mean, it all happened within 30 seconds over the phone, and they never got back to me. Now, I was utterly surprised because, as I said, what I posted online on my X account, I think, was favorable to the conservative ideology, and I made that statement on my account to describe how I felt with regards to the retrieval or the impediment that the party had shown with free expression. If they take that away from individuals, it is contrary to the spirit of the democratic process. And they never gave the media a reason or pointed to something that I had said which had triggered that decision. And then from there on, the media started mentioning things about the reasons why the the Conservative Party had taken the decision, which were in some parts erroneous.
Yeah, well, it was horrible timing as well, Stefan, because at the same day they were announcing you were out of the race, they had Mark Carney on the ropes over the Paul Chiang nomination
Correct.
in Markham. And they completely distracted the media's attention from the fact that Mark Carney was standing behind a man who offered up his conservative opponent to the Chinese consulate for a bounty. And clearly Mark Carney is in the pocket of China. He was afraid to upset China. And so what does the Conservative Party do? They focus on you. And they won't even say exactly what it is. Something about those social media posts. So I had a look at your social media, and I said, "Hey, the guy talks exactly like I do, and so many other conservatives. What is the problem with saying that Bill Gates has made billions off of the COVID vaccine? That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a fact. Anybody can tell you that looks at the situation rationally." And I know it really got you in trouble. You suggested that the invasion of Ukraine by Russia might have had something to do with the ever constant expansion of NATO over the last 20 years. Of course it did. We promised Russia, we promised Gorbachev, NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward. And we said that, in 1990, 1991. And Gorbachev took us at our word. He disbanded the Warsaw Pact. NATO has kept expanding. And they even continue to talk about the idiocy of Ukraine joining, which ain't going to happen. But once again,
to Jeffrey Sachs on that matter. You listen to Jeffrey Sachs on that matter. He gives you an extraordinary portrait of what it is that happened throughout the years with regards to NATO expansion.
Well, that's funny. I was just about to say, look at Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia, and of course John Mearsheimer, Professor John Mearsheimer from Chicago University of Chicago, says the same thing and has documented this extensively. So these are not conspiracy theories; these are facts. And right. I love the one about the World Economic Forum, because Poilievre has said many times in the past, I've been in the same room when he has said none of his cabinet and MPs will be hobnobbing with the World Economic Forum when I'm prime minister. So you criticize the World Economic Forum. I don't know a conservative who hasn't. I criticize it here every week. And if you think that's a conspiracy theory, go look at the WEF website, where they talk about eating insects, where they talk about 15-minute cities where you can never leave, and they talk about being happy and owning nothing. It's communism. But once again, this is all, we can't talk about that. It might upset CBC. And this is what I really think happened here, Stefan, is that this is not Pierre Poilievre. He's on the campaign. He's running around the country doing rallies, and he's getting huge numbers. It's his communications people, again, who are trying to move the party to the left or to the center, if you will, in the middle of a campaign, because they want to please the CBC and the CTV and those mainstream media people that never really liked Pierre Poilievre. So they're doing their best to change the message. And it was all about go after Donald Trump, go after Donald Trump. That's going to win this election for you. Well, of course it's not. And I was heartened to read a column a week ago. I'm sorry for going on like this. I want to hear more from you. But David Coletto, whom I know from my time at Sun News, he was the official pollster for Sun News for that short-lived television station. Was on for 8 months. And David Coletto wrote a column about a week ago for The Hub, and he said, Pierre Poilievre, stop focusing on Donald Trump. That's what the liberals want you to do. Focus on change. Talk about the last 10 years. Talk about what the liberals have done to this country. Don't talk about Donald Trump. Talk about change. And you know what? I think he listened. I think he read that column. And when Stephen Harper introduced Pierre Poilievre in Edmonton two nights ago, and I think he had 15,000 people at that rally, Stephen Harper starts off by talking about we need change. And he says it about twice, 3 times. Poilievre gets to the stage. He's talking about change. To remember the last 10 years. Do you think Pierre Poilievre is finding his voice and is starting to ignore the communications people who sometimes give him, well, I'll say it, stupid advice that's just going to get conservatives angry for disqualifying perfectly good candidates like you, and never is going to make the liberal or the mainstream media happy?
Well, firstly, I would say that Pierre Poilievre is the actual best potential prime minister that we have out there right now, to bring us through the hardships that the Liberal Party has caused us to experience over the past 2 mandates. He has an incredibly clear discourse, and he may perhaps at times trip because of what his campaign managers give him as fodder to express to the population. But he most definitely should not fall into the Trump derangement syndrome, which is sort of an obsessive, all-encompassing mind warp. He has to be careful not to engage in that conversation overtly and too much, and come back to some of those very important points of the political statement and platform. And he does connect with so many of us Canadian citizens. Unfortunately, the media, indeed, because as we know, the Conservative Party has said that it would reconsider the relationship that the state has with state media and with grants allotted to private media, because, as it should, media should be independent so that they can give an impartial opinion about what is happening in the country. And the media are problematic in many ways. We need the media. We know how important they are. They are one of the bodies that represent separations of power. We know that. And so they need to take upon themselves to more justly evaluate the current political paysage spectrum. So definitely, Pierre, and as I mentioned to you before, I have no qualms that with regards to the manner in which my rescinding occurred. I think it is a matter of internal policy within the Quebec chapter. Remember, there's a lot of candidates that were discredited and put off the mandate to represent. There are some that were actually officialized, like Ernesto Almeida, and there were some really star candidates in the Quebec area, such as Jonathan Poulin and Marie-Josée Elie, who had been vetted by their associations, had worked so hard for many, many months to achieve that level of support from the local electorate, and were completely discarded at the last moment by the party placing in a candidate that was smack out of another area of the province. So I continue to believe that the Conservative policies are the best for our nation in this crisis, which is unprecedented in my lifetime, I would say. If the Conservatives don't come into power, In April on the 28th, I would suggest that we're in for a lot of trouble. My story is minor with regards to the bigger story of the Canadian nation. I don't see it as something that I need to hold a grudge against. In fact, I'm very philosophical about it. I'm like the Stoics, who believe that everything happens for a reason. And maybe what occurred to me in this story is a matter of public interest in the end, because it brings forth the idea of freedom of speech, which is the cornerstone of all democracies. If we do not respect this most important of all liberties, we will not be able to engage in proper public management.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's why I'm calling this out. And because, as I said to you before we did the formal interview, I'm not calling this out to be petty. I'm not calling this out because I don't like Pierre Poilievre. I'm not calling this out because I'm trying to help Mark Carney. God knows, if you read my material, I'm not helping Mark Carney. But I think we need to defend freedom of speech at every opportunity, because if we lose that precious freedom, we lose our democracy, and we lose it all. And I don't care if we lose it during a liberal or a conservative administration. It doesn't matter where we lose it. It matters if we lose it. And I think just listening to you today, I think you exemplify somebody who's not got an axe to grind. You're not an embittered personality. You're not somebody who wants to get back at the party. I've never seen a more consummately reasonable human being in your situation. So I applaud what you're saying, and I think other people would have really have gone off the wall after being subjected to this. And I think it was completely inappropriate what happened to you. I think it was completely disrespectful. And I think it was unacceptable. And I'll keep saying that. I'm not going to excuse it in any matter. But I think you're being very, very gracious, sir, about this. And I applaud your attitude. I guess my final question, I said you would keep this to 20 minutes or so. Mm-hmm. Do you think Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives can still win this election?
Well, as we've seen before in other contexts, it isn't polls, it isn't media specialist experts that are on panels who decide who is going to lead in a democratic process. It is the people. That's it. There's no other outcome. People might try to influence the process. The Chinese government might want to try to push Mark Carney's posts on social media. In the end, it's a one man, one vote, one woman, one vote situation, and we must rely on that for the final outcome. I only hope that the general public, the citizens of this country, will understand what the stakes are. They need to inform themselves as much as possible. This is it's a duty at this moment in our history.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I want to thank you for being as gracious as you are about this, and at the same time recognizing that freedom of speech is important. You have straddled a line, a very difficult line. I think you've done it very well. I hope your political career is not over, and I hope there's a second or third chance for you in this, and I wish you all the best. I'm so glad we had a chance to talk about this. I think it did, to some extent, clear the air for a lot of people who were wondering, he must be really mad at the Conservatives, and other people who thought, well, why did this happen in the first place? And I think we've probably clarified that. And
well, thank you for giving me that opportunity. And well, let's just hope that my social credit score hasn't gone completely to zero.
Right? I hope so. Yes. Stefan, thank you for joining me today. God bless and Godspeed, and we'll stay in contact, hopefully.
Thank you very much, David, for the opportunity to clear the air.
And you're quite welcome. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was Stefan Marque. He was a former conservative candidate. I think we really cleared the air on this. Before we leave today, I want to show you a couple of clips to see how bad Mark Carney is doing with the tax haven issue. He's not handling this well at all. Listen to this.
Hi, Mr. Carney. Abigail Beeman, CTV News. On tax havens in relation to Brookfield, you've said that you know how the world works. Should Canadians infer from that that you wouldn't condemn the use of tax havens?
I'm very strong. I have a long career in the private sector. I have a longer career in the public sector. What's important is that we have a effective tax system, and that every company follows the rules of those tax to not just the letter but the spirit of those regulations. And we need to continue to refine our tax system to ensure that companies are paying their fair share of tax.
Yeah, companies are paying their fair share of tax. Mark Carney wasn't paying his fair share of tax. Brookfield Assets Management wasn't paying its fair share of tax. So yeah, it's a two-tiered system. And that was a pathetic answer from this man. He basically is admitting, yeah, the rules don't apply to me. And he's got the gall to suggest companies should be true to the letter and the spirit of the law when his company was true to neither. That's why I'm enthused about Poilievre's promise to bring these corporate tax bums to heel. Because this has got to stop, this capitalist cronyism. Corporate cronyism, whatever you want to call it, corporate welfare bums. These people who think they don't have to pay tax and everybody else does. Let's come to a point where nobody's paying corporate tax, but while we were paying corporate tax, they had better play by the rules. Let's go after these people. This is what Poilievre is saying. I 100% agree with it. Here's what he said last night. This is good too.
Today, this is breaking news. Mark Carney was asked point blank if, as Prime Minister of Canada, he would condemn tax havens, international tax havens in the Caribbean, where multinational corporations stash their cash to avoid paying what they owe. Now, for the first time in the history of Canada, a Prime Minister was unwilling to condemn these international tax havens for multinationals and billionaires. Just today, he dodged the question just like he dodged his taxes. And you know why? Because he's in a conflict of interest. He has billions of dollars of his company assets stashed away in Bermuda in a post office box above a bicycle shop. You know, he didn't put the money there because it's nice weather in Bermuda. He put it there because Bermuda is known as the most flagrant tax haven anywhere on earth. And his company has been called Canada's biggest tax dodger. Now, that would be a terrible thing for him to have in his past, but it's not the past. It's the present. He continues to have millions of dollars invested in this company, which is hiding its money away from paying taxes. So let's get this straight. While the police officers here in the Soo, or that waitress who's struggling to feed her kids, or the small businesses that are hanging on by a thread, are forced to pay high Liberal taxes, Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, is still invested in tax havens that dodge his bill. My friends, that is not putting Canada first. That is not the change we need. We need a new Conservative government that will put our taxpayers first for a change.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah. When I come back after this brief message for the store, my concluding remark. Hey, isn't that great material? Isn't that great gear? Lovely. I think it's the best material. I say that every day, but I mean it. And please, if you buy some of this stuff, put it on, get a picture of yourself and send it to me. Send it to me, and I will happily put it up. And I know I've got to make sure. Maybe some of you are sending them in, and I'm missing them. I'm going to have a better look today. But I'm going to leave you with this today. Poilievre is going to make more than $1 billion if he cracks down on people like Mark Carney and others who are sending their profits to Bermuda and other tax havens so they don't have to pay taxes in Canada. And I tell you, why is this a smart strategy? Why is this a smart strategy? Because it's not just a conservative issue. It's not just a small c conservative issue. It attracts people on the left as well who say, yeah, why should these big companies be getting away with not paying their taxes when I have to pay my taxes? Go back to 1972, David Lewis, leader of the New Democratic Party at that time. His campaign slogan was, "Stop the corporate welfare bums." So this is something that resonates across the political spectrum. And I think it's a winning issue for Pierre Poilievre. I think he can tie this together if he stops listening to the idiots in the communications department who want him to talk about Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump all day long, and starts listening to that inner voice that speaks about change and freedom, making Canada the freest country in the world. Remember Poilievre used to say that every Axe the Tax rally? That's where he needs to be. And that's where I think he's finally listening to that voice again. Thanks for watching today, folks. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. God bless, Godspeed, and I'm David Krayden. Thank you.